Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss Rishi Sunak's reaction to being asked why in his raft of supposedly new rail projects to replace HS2 he included projects which had already been implemented, built, finished. To say that his response was bad would be an understatement. It just serves to show yet again how monumentally awful the Prime Minister is going to be when he faces a real grilling in the election campaign. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So when Rishi Sunak cancelled HS2 last week, I already talked about this, he aimed to get away with it within his own party and amongst some voters by making two claims. First, that it was screwing Labour over, which was apparently reason enough to support it. Second, that £36 billion would be used to fund better transport projects in the north, with the overview being called Network North. Only the wheels fell off fairly quickly. There were several problems immediately, not the least of which is that people wanted HS2. But the main problems with the offer beyond that. First, about half of these so-called Network North projects were in the south. Second, it all looks suspiciously like the projects were designed to link up free ports, another Tory dodgy dealing, which should get some proper scrutiny once Labour are in power. Third, some of the projects had previously been announced years earlier in many cases, meaning that it wasn't a replacement to HS2 at all. The government had promised both. Fourth, that at least one project being promoted was quietly deleted from the government's website the following day. I say quietly, Labour made quite a lot of noise about it. And fifth, two of the projects had already been completed, one 8 years ago and the other 9 years ago. And it was these projects which Tom Swarbrick brought up with Sunak on his LBC show. He first of all asked about the Nottingham service, which opened 8 years ago. He asked the Prime Minister if that project was included in the list in error. Now, before I get on to Sunak's quite stunningly bad response, let's first of all discuss the easy answer to that question. The correct way to feel that question is, yes, it was included in error. The bottom line is, that project had demonstrably been completed. How can you claim anything other than it's already completed? There's no denying it. You don't want to look like a con artist. So, of course, you say, yes, sorry, that was a mistake. And move on. So, did Sunak say this? No. He was asked, was it included in error? Sunak's response was to say, no. Okay, so you included an already completed project deliberately. He then went on to say, none of these things were fully funded. Now, he might be able to get away with saying that when it comes to the projects announced years ago, that he has simply re-announced. However, even then, it's a bad response politically because the immediate follow-up was, well, you're basically saying the Conservatives announced projects which aren't fully funded and have been doing so for years. Sunak is literally making the claim you cannot trust that the Tories have costed any project that they promise, and Labour should make a meal of that when the time comes. If I were them, I'd be clipping this response and using it in their election campaign alongside the one of him talking about taking money from deprived areas and giving it to affluent areas. That will definitely come up. But going back to this idea of none of these things were fully funded. At this point, he was being specifically asked about the Nottingham-Clifton South line, which opened 8 years ago. Sunak can't say that this wasn't fully funded because it's already completed. It clearly was funded because it was built. It's there. It's been in operation for years. I cannot get over how magnificently awful Rishi Sunak is at dealing with questions like this. It's like his advisors set him up with a plan. It's like he can only focus on one thing. It's like, okay, Prime Minister, here's what you do. When they ask you about the projects that were announced years ago, you just say they weren't fully funded and now you've done that. It's still a bad plan from his advisors because, like I said, making the claim that Tory governments, which people have actually voted for, didn't cost their plans. But you might get away with it in the context of you being a different sort of leader. You know, being happy to throw your predecessors under the bus, as Boris Johnson did, for example. Okay, that could work. But you don't use that response to deal with the already completed projects. What sort of idiot thinks that works? Then it seemed to get worse when he was tackled about the Leamside line. Now, this was a project that was included in the list on the day Sunak gave his speech and then deleted from the website a day later. Sunak said that the money would be given to the mayor in the northeast, which is the relevant area, and they would decide how best to spend it. He said it shouldn't be up to Westminster politicians to decide how to spend the money, but for people in the affected region. Now, first of all, it's interesting that he's supporting one of Starmer's major reform plans, that more decision making should be made regionally. But secondly, why was the project mentioned at all then? And what about all the others? Why does that answer, like, he's talking about one project that was deleted. How does that answer that? If Sunak is simply, if he's now saying that he's only going to provide the funding and it's up to regional governments, mayors, whoever, to decide how to spend it, why has his government listed any projects? Shouldn't they just be announcing the funding that different regions will get and letting them get on with it? Not that this would necessarily be a proper replacement for HS2, because the whole point of HS2 was to begin the process of linking up the country, connecting different regions. So if you now take funding from that and let individual regions do their own thing, that's fine for intra-regional development, but not inter-regional development. But it still made no sense. Either Sunak's government is organising these projects, or they're just organising the funding. If they're organising the projects, then he's just lied about the Leamston line. And if it's that they're just organising the funding, then he's still lied, because his government still has a list of transport projects that they claim to be behind, including 2 that he mentioned in the same answer, Bradford and Leeds. I may as well finish off by pointing out that he did say he was boasting about a massive transfer of resources to local areas. Let us be clear, he is not. This funding will never materialise. There will not be a penny. This is why Sunak cannot afford an election next autumn. The Sun are apparently reporting that the Tories are getting cold feet about a May election because of the economic outlook. Tough titty. If they wait until next autumn, they're going to have a much worse prospect. People are going to ask where this funding is. Doesn't exist. It's never going to exist. It's all a con. And if Sunak leaves the election much later than the budget announcement next March, he's going to get found out. One day, someone's going to write a book about how not to do Westminster politics, and Rishi Sunak's face is going to be on the front cover. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.